Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, September the 12th at 6 o'clock is called to order. Establishment of quorum. Have that. Approval of the agenda. Let's take a.
I move that the agenda be approved as presented. Second.
And requires a roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Patterson, aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Next on the agenda is the citizens period. Are there any citizens that wish to speak? Close the citizens period. Next on the agenda is the major subdivision review, Asbury Lane Phase 2. And we're going to consider the major subdivision application for Asbury Lane Phase 2 submitted by Fusion Holdings LLC for the creation of 11 lots on Asbury Lane. In your packet, you have a summary by Mr. Anderson. And do you have anything you need to say to us, Billy?
I don't have anything particular, anything other than what's in the packet. Joe Fracey, who's represented since the submittal of this plat, of course, the title has changed over. Fusion Holding has conveyed the property over. Joe is the representative for the owner. Everything stays the same on the plat with the exception of the signator and the source of title. So nothing else technically will change on the plat. Everything else that stays the same. Joe was also New Line Construction, or Joe Fracey was the original submitter as well in 2000 or May of this year. So he was the original submitter as well. So nothing else is going to change on it.
Anybody with any questions for Billy?
Yeah, I mean, I have some questions. For the approval of this, for the subdivision on these extra lots here,
Yes.
I see there's obviously you have a list of notes here. I think this is obviously 5B, but
5B. Yes.
yeah, but in order for these lots to be approved, because I know definitely my big thing is just the water control there. Because it does say in here with DEQ to consider the stormwater for the phase 2 is on each of these lots.
Yes, per discussion with Kelly Miller from DEQ, you can develop a piece of property two ways as what's considered a common plan development. Either A, the developer goes through and accounts for all stormwater that's proposed to be generated on a site and develops a mass stormwater control. Or from discussion again with Kelly Miller, she says that the lots can basically submit a individual. It's basically an application for permit for each lot, and all it does is basically it's a small. It doesn't even have to be a design plan from an engineer. It's basically a description, almost like an agreement in lieu of plan through DEQ that indicates how they intend to transform any concentrated stormwater back into sheet flow prior to leaving off the properties. Are they going to collect from downspouts and then basically discharge back onto flat ground? Basically a small permit that they file for each of these individual ones. That's basically where this is a portion of what's considered a common plan development, which extends from Carrington all the way down to the rest of the property.
Because obviously we heard from citizens before about the problem with the stormwater through there.
Yeah.
And yet you're wanting to approve these. I mean, obviously application looks fine, all that sort of stuff. But I'm concerned about the stormwater being a problem with these houses. Do you think it's going to be a problem with these houses, the stormwater?
The rest of these houses, lot sizes, there are some small lots. I think lots 18. Most of these lots will not discharge anything to the street system. I mean, lots like 19, 18, 20, and 21 are the ones that front. These are decent sized lots. The rest of them, you're looking to acreages of 1.6, 1.7 for single family residential houses. From discussion with Kelly Miller, looking at the size of these lots, there should be no issue conveying a comparable size house that's out here now, which is 1,800 square feet, and any associated driveways back into a sheet flow before it would get anywhere down to a collection area.
Because basically they're using that pond as a, I mean, that is a natural pond there, but they're using that as a detention pond, aren't they?
Stormwater is discharged into it. It's collected from the street.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any design plans on it.
Is that not going to cause an issue? Because obviously my concern is for the people obviously down the road here. They said that they have problems already. In your opinion, do you think that's going to cause any problems not having some sort of detention pond or something that controls that stormwater? This is my
from a discussion with Kelly Miller, looking over aerials of the site when we talked about it. Since this is not the density of this is not, this is R1 of the size of these lots, the density that these houses will be constructed here. She didn't see any issue with having these have their own individual methods of stormwater control. She just didn't see, as far as DEQ didn't see any problem with them allowing them to have an individual little.
Has DEQ been out to the site to look, and they have no problem with it?
Jason McCroskey has been at the site with me, and Kelly Miller, she's familiar with the site as well.
Okay. I mean, as long as, like I said, I'm just concerned for the people who were in here beginning of the year. They were concerned about the stormwater.
If these were, to me, if this was more density and more street construction, smaller lots, you get into, I believe you get into some more concentrated flows. Right now, all the street drainage that comes off the top of the hill, as well as any collected drainage that comes off the structures. Right now, the only houses that contribute to the street drainage would be the duplex on lot 8, lot 7, 6, because all those are above the road. The rest of the houses on the low side, 6, I guess that's 5, 4, lots 3, 2, and 1. Those all basically the downspouts discharge to the rear of the property, which basically go back to sheet flow from the downspouts. They don't ever enter the street system, and basically can add on to the concentrated flow.
So, at the bottom of this pond here, is there some sort of outlet for the overflow on this part, or is lot 17 going to get flooded?
There is an outfall pipe down here, as far as in the bottom of the structure. There's an outfall pipe that goes in and it has a control. I guess you would consider it a controlled discharge out.
And where would that discharge onto, Billy?
Out through this way right here.
Out onto lot 17.
Yes.
So is that not a concern that it discharges out there, and there may be a house there that may get all that discharge coming through?
It's a possibility. Like I said, lot 17 has its challenges with access. It does have adequate road frontage along Vanmar Drive. Is that the width of the lot meets zoning standard? There is a drop off that comes off of Vanmar Drive that would have to be dealt with to gain access. But I guess again that would have to be considered when you're developing the site as far as a potential buyer. Same thing with lot 16. Lot 16 also has a good size drop off to get down to it. The drain fields that are in there. Of course, Virginia Department of Health's looked at them. They looked at the contours. They looked at the location of them in respect to any swells that they're required to be a certain distance from any swells anyway, like low areas. So as far as the drain fields out of these discharge areas, the VDH wouldn't approve them if they were down in a low
Sure.
potential flood area.
I mean, I don't have a problem with the whole application. The only problem I had was really just the stormwater, and specifically lot 17 there. I was just worried that, you know, that would just get flooded out.
It's on the downhill side of an impoundment.
Mhm.
I can't say that it would never have any issues.
So you don't think that there should be any sort of control measures for that one lot there to try and help out with the situation or not?
If there's a control measure if there's a control measure that I can suggest that's within the subdivision ordinance, other than,
Okay.
I think we went through this with Mr. Tobin and had some lots out there that would require some amendment in order to be developable. But
I mean, that's the only concern I have. I mean,
Yeah.
The rest of it, I mean, I don't have a problem. It's just that concern with that stormwater there. And I mean, are you saying that DQ seems to be happy enough with it?
DQ says that this lot sizes would be appropriate for someone to file for individual permit coverage. Again, it's not like a commercial site where they have to. It's not a pay permit. It's just a submittal paper.
Cool.
They end up indicating how they intend to take concentrated flow off the houses, the sidewalks, patios, and describe how they'll transform it back into a sheet flow prior to exiting the property.
And so that still has to be. They still have to come up with that plan for that, don't they?
It would basically be on the submittal. If I'm correct, when I looked at the submittal, talking with Kelly, the submittal has you can do a description of how you intend to do it. It's less, you want to say it's less formal, but it's still potentially cumbersome on the potential buyer to do it. They still have to file the paperwork, but it's less design work and more of a conceptual idea from the builder, how they plan to take care of it.
Okay.
It's kind of all described. There's lines and there's questions in the application that when the owner fills it out that describes how, their proposed square footage, they intend to have X amount of impervious surface. The impervious surface is collected via either proposed swells on site, or they're collected via downspouts from the downspout gutters or the trench drains or something like that. And basically, there's a place to describe how that you will go from that concentrated flow back into just straight sheet flow onto the natural ground.
I mean, because it just seems strange to me that, with all these lots that are going in here, that there's no sort of detention pond, just an existing pond there, which obviously gets natural water in anyway. But there's no need for a detention pond. I mean, I've never seen a subdivision without having some sort of detention pond. So I'm wondering how that got passed without having a detention pond.
From the original? You're referring to from...
I'm talking about the extra lots. I mean, I know they had an original one that applies to, was it Carrington Place that they had there?
There was the pond there that we have no records that indicate. We don't have a design record from early 80s when the original facility was kind of put in. We don't have design data that indicates. Currently, right now, the storm drainage that comes off of Carrington facility itself is collected. The parking lot comes in through and enters into a trench drain. A good bit of the parking lot comes into a trench drain right here where it enters Asbury Lane.
Uh-huh.
That drainage goes on down through a collection system that runs parallel to this Asbury Lane right here and joins with another collection system which brings downspouts off the back of the building and I believe as well as the parking lot drainage that comes in from the backside of Asbury. A lot of that comes over here and comes into this facility, into this pipe network, and comes into an inlet structure here, then goes underground through a pipe network and ends up discharging down here.
Going to that natural pond.
That pond, yeah. The rest of the drainage that comes off of Asbury Lane itself, the road corridor, again, comes down via ditches to a series of culverts which cross from here on the northeast side to the southwest side, and then discharge into a pipe that goes down here again that discharges to the pond.
Right.
So the pond itself, in all senses, is being used for stormwater control.
Right.
We don't have formal plans or prior plans or anything on from when this facility was constructed to say that.
I mean, that's why I'm confused about that. We don't, in this subdivision, there's no detention pond. It's just that natural pond that's there, but it's not really a detention pond because it's full of water the whole time. So it's not really going to help with the stormwater coming in.
Well, it would be considered a wet pond. I mean, you'll have there's detention basins that you can have that are dry ponds. There's also ones that are wet ponds that would have a constant pool, as long as the outlet structure was designed to still accommodate on top of wet storage any stormwater.
So do you know what that capacity is there for that?
Do not. We don't have any prior plans for anything like that.
I mean, this is why I don't understand why there isn't a detention pond with this subdivision. Is it not strange to you that it doesn't have one?
Billy, can I add something?
Absolutely.
Okay. Madam Chair, is that okay? Okay. So for those of you who may not know, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality is the agency they are the ones that have the requirement for stormwater management in the state of Virginia. Some localities do opt to have their own stormwater program, but in Virginia, it's an opt-in or an opt-out. So the town of Wytheville has opted out of managing our own stormwater program. So what we do is we always default to DEQ. So if DEQ stormwater management says that this plan of development is okay, then typically we do not get involved in the details of that, because essentially we do not have the regulations to go in the weeds on what types of best management practices or calculations, requirements. Now, getting to your question of why the developer may or may not have wanted to do a stormwater pond, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, most developers will go ahead and do a stormwater management system so that when they market the lots, the actual homeowners don't have to go and pull those individual permits. And in essence, what that does is it helps with the markability of the lots, because you're essentially selling a lot that has already gone through that process. You have a common stormwater pond. But if I understand correctly, Billy, this developer made the decision to not do an overall plan of development that would have a stormwater pond separate from the one shown on the plat, because their decision was to let every individual lot owner that's going to invest in that community pull their own stormwater permit. And so essentially how that will be regulated is in our permitting office. We will make sure that before homes are constructed, that they have their piece of paper from DEQ for each individual lot. Did I explain that correctly?
That's correct. The way Kelly describes it is an option to, it's a way of going ahead and marketing out any unknowns, that if you were to have a home buyer come in to buy a home, the lots are what they are. You pay for what they are, and they are ready to go. Other ways, if you elect to where they kind of handle their own, then it's perceived as potentially an unknown, and it may, again, like Lane said, may make a lot less marketable, because now someone has to kind of figure it out. Kelly says most through DEQ, most of the time they do see mass stormwater detention.
Right.
She says they do see some every once in a while that are like this, that are, it's a facet of how the developer, their finances, and how they want to develop the property. And ultimately, as long as it's developed with the appropriate permit coverage, then DEQ kind of has that avenue for them to do it.
So can you see the homeowners, they have to get these stormwater controls?
Basically, what we would do when the building permit is filed for it, we would go ahead and submit or have them basically give them a link to the permitting process that they have to go through and the contact form, and they could complete the paperwork themselves, and that paperwork would be uploaded to their building permit prior to basically approval.
And like I said, DQ, they have those stormwater, they'll have those for the individual owners, whatever, but DQ's not out here. They don't see it when that pond floods and goes overflows. They haven't seen any of that situation. We've had people come in here and complain about the flooding that happens down through there. So
I can't speak for myself personally. To the southwest of Vanmar Drive is probably 250 acres of farm drainage basin that convey water all the way to the top of Crougy's Field, way back in here, down through these culverts, down through this main swale. I can't say that I've ever seen this pond flooded. I can't say that I've ever seen anything that's flooded, or I can say it's all of it's coming from southwest of Vanmar Drive, but there is a large drainage basin that conveys underneath Vanmar Drive that has a large area to the southwest of this.
So basically, you're saying that the flooding that has been happening down there isn't necessarily coming from.
I can't say that it is or is not for myself, but I'm stating that to the southwest of Vanmar Drive is a very large drainage basin that basically concentrates stormwater that comes off anything that doesn't infiltrate, impound, basically infiltrating into the ground from saturation, impound into small crevices and dips in the ground, or evaporate off, ends up down in this culvert, down through this well.
Sure. I'm just trying
in addition to what's coming off the pond. In addition to what's the pond.
And I'm just trying to look out for the homeowners there to make sure that they're not going to get flooded or anything like that. That's what I'm trying to look out for here. So that's why I was asking these questions on the detention pond. But if DEQ is happy with that, then I don't have a problem.
So that's what I've been relayed from Kelly as far as an avenue for these lots to be created would be through this method.
Okay.
Billy, I've got a question. The new lots are going to use our town water. They're either going to get it from Vanmar Drive or Asbury.
Correct.
Is our town pipes adequate right now to furnish water to these new lots? Or is the town in for a big surprise and we're going to have to do any additional construction out there?
No, ultimately, when Asbury Lane 6-inch line comes, when it's fully, when it's running, it's running now. Again, we have a subdivision agreement that'll be completed here sometime soon. There is a warranty period for Asbury Lane that covers from the developer standpoint. If there's any problem with Asbury Lane, the developers will do repairs on it up until that 1-year warranty, which is a standard construction warranty. After that, it'll be ours. A 6-inch line now through there will have no problem feeding this density of residents, including having the fire flow down at the bottom of the hill and top of the hill. So a 6-inch line will have no problem with that. Vanmar Drives is also, I believe, a 6-inch line, which shouldn't have any problem providing residential, 3/4 inch flow to these houses. So I don't expect the town to have to do any infrastructure. We will perform the taps on our system, being that these are our lines. We would do the tap and extend the meter. It would be a similar process that we did with these lots here, to where basically the materials fees is covered by, since that's typically a portion of the development, the materials fee is covered by the developer, like we did in Asbury. But the town forces still do the taps on the line, since it's technically ours, and we don't generally allow contractors to do taps or manipulate anything that we have in our current system. I don't see any issue with provision of domestic water to this density of residents now.
And how about the traffic, Billy, with the added lots being put in there on that Asbury Lane there, whatever, coming out to, what's it come out to?
Holston Road.
Holston Road, yeah.
Uh,
You see any issues with that?
I can't foresee any. Sight distance is good coming out of it. You don't have any issue with sight distance coming looking to the southwest or northeast coming off of Asbury Lane. I don't foresee any issue.
Okay.
The street's been improved to be adequate to what VDOT wants us. The paved surface with things like that. They went through and corrected some of the radiuses coming onto Holston Road and smoothed it out a little bit. And those were made via the first application of phase one. So as far as from my standpoint, this density, they do have a temporary turnaround at the bottom of the hill. It's kind of near lot 18.
Mm-hmm.
A temporary turnaround right there. And that's what PDOT requires us to have is at least one point to turn around. If it's not a cul-de-sac, it'll have to be a T-style turnaround or a hammer style.
Right.
That's all VDOT would require us to do as far as that goes. But given the sight distance and you're in a flat spot on the roads, you don't have to worry about vertical grades, trying to look over a hill or anything like that. I don't see any issue with people pulling in and out of there as far as, frankly, there's probably that much traffic coming out now. A lot of people that enter and exit from Asbury or Carrington Center also exit out that entrance right there.
Like I said, my main concern is obviously that stormwater, but if DEQ is good, because it'd really just be on lot 17 and 16 that I'll be concerned with that pond going out there.
Yeah.
And if there is no piping across to get down to the lower section, then, I mean, that's the only concern that I have. But if you think there's not really a problem there, then.
VDH has reviewed the septics and approved them and their locations in respect to the topography. The submitted plats that go along with each of these septic systems has topographic data on it, so VDH can see how they lay in respect to the natural ground. They do require to keep them out of swells certain distances,
right,
away from active water courses and things like that. VDH has looked at it and seems to be okay with it.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion surrounding that? Sounds like we've got several questions yet. And I'm not sure how we feel about it, but the recommendation to Town Council regarding the major subdivision application for Asbury Lane Phase 2 submitted by Fusion Holdings requires a motion and roll call vote.
Madam Chairman, I'll move that we recommend to Town Council to approve the application for Asbury Lane Phase 2 submitted by Fusion Holdings.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
George Wicker, aye. Keith Jones, aye.
Patterson, aye.
Lisa Anderson, aye.
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 The next item of business is to review the results of the citizens survey.
All right. In your packets, you should all have two documents related to the survey and the marketing. The first is a timeline listing the various activities that we've done to encourage community input and community outreach regarding the proposed UDO. And it lists a number of activities. I'll just highlight a few. We did put together an information piece that was included in water bills, which it says on your packet went out to 3,500 households. I'm told that that's about 3,600 actually on our list. That includes households and businesses located in town, anyone that has a water account. There were a number of two press releases that were sent out, which were picked up for 4 different articles in the Wytheville Enterprise. We did a radio segment for the Talk of the Town broadcast. There was a banner ad that ran in the Enterprise. I believe that went in for 2 separate weeks. Emailings that went out to 200 town employees as well as 270 community members that we had for people that we knew might be interested in this process. Our social media campaign reached 3,600 people, and of those, 655 actually clicked through the ad and would have had an opportunity to see information about the survey and the open house that we held for the information event. At the open house, we had 16 people that attended, which, although it's not a huge number, it's one of the larger showings we've had for anything that we've put together for the public. Far exceeded the information meetings that we've held for various street projects. And so we were pleased with that number. The citizen survey that was up for about 3.5 weeks, we had 60 people who responded to the survey, which again is not a huge number, but it is, in current trends, a good number of people to respond for a survey of this type. And in the second document that you have is the summary. Well, it's actually the detailed listing of survey responses. And I'm not going to go over those here, but I will in the next segment as we talk about changes to the UDO. We'll go through some of those numbers. Any questions about the survey that was?
It's interesting reading.
Mm-hmm. Had some very good comments, and for the most part, the response was positive. There were a few comments here and there that were opposed to a particular idea or two, but in each of those cases, there were also a number of responses, generally more in favor of those same policies.
I think you got a good cross section.
Mm-hmm.
Don, I thought out of the 42 responses, it was interesting, 81% were people from Wytheville that live in town limits.
Yeah, there were only, I think, 3 respondents that didn't either live in town or own property in town. So there were several that had a business or an owned property for some other reason, even though they lived outside town limits. So most of the respondents were, have a vested interest in how this ordinance plays out and how it is implemented.
I think what really disturbed me the most out of the survey, if you look at each page at the bottom, other comments. I mean, have we satisfied everybody's questions? Have we done our work?
Well,
Have we? They're still asking questions.
they certainly are. And we live in an interesting time. There's information overload in our society. There's so many ways that you can get information. And unfortunately, what that results in is that we ignore a lot of the information that's out there. Readership of newspapers is down. And with streaming services, people listening to radio broadcasts, that's also down. And it makes it very difficult to get the word out about something like this. I think that's a good indicator of how the social media helped get responses. To know that 655 people looked at that ad closely enough to click on it and read a little more. That's a pretty good response rate. So I think, would I like more? Absolutely. But I think that compared to other comments I've heard from other people in my position in other communities, we got a pretty good response rate. And I have no doubt that if you ask 10 people at random in the community, that most of them would say they hadn't heard anything about it. But that's unfortunately the nature of our day.
I don't see how you could have done any more, though.
We live in a time of general apathy, unfortunately.
It may not be apathy, but certainly we're overwhelmed by the amount of things that are screaming for our attention. And it's become very easy to let the phone call go to voicemail, and because it's probably, if you don't know the name or the number, it's probably a junk call. So it's just the nature of our day.
Yeah, but what's really important, we need not only just to get the message out, the facts.
Mm-hmm.
They need the facts. And sometimes they're not open. Sometimes public's not open to listening to the facts. So I hope this board's done a good job. We've worked on this project for over 2 years. And we put a lot of hard work into it and a lot of discussions.
And much of the work that went in before those 2 years is part of this document, as we worked on fence ordinances and sign ordinances. And
I've been on this board for 12 years, and I can't remember a time we didn't discuss it. For 12 years straight.
Yeah.
But now we're getting to the final stages.
Finally, we get into the final stages, David.
But sorry.
And there's still skepticism, and they're asking, you're not listening to me.
Right.
And I want to make sure that's what we're doing. We're listening.
Absolutely. And I think there's still, because now we're at the final stages where it's going to affect everyone in the town here.
Yeah.
If you approve this thing, it's going to affect everyone. And we don't know what's going to happen to, because there's obviously a lot of negative comments in there as well. Not that we have to go by all the negative, but we have to listen to everyone to see what they have to say, because we all live in the town here and we want to do what's best for the town. But, what is the next stage from here? I see you have there could be a public hearing. Is that just to talk more about the UDO?
The adoption process for this ordinance will be like any other change to the zoning ordinance. There first needs to be a public hearing held by this body, in which you will have that would be advertised through the normal procedures, and you will listen to whatever input comes in from the citizens, and then you will make a decision whether to recommend this for adoption to council or to make any changes before that happens. You'll have an opportunity to consider the comments and make your decision on how to proceed from there. Once, presuming that recommendation is made to council, then council will go through a similar process where there will be a hearing set and citizens will come in, and then town council will vote to make it their decision whether to adopt or reject or somehow modify the proposal.
I mean, because I would like to see more of the public hearings of people in here to hear what they have to say. I mean, I know that we've got all these comments here, but to actually hear from people before, because do we have to prove this before they come in for that, or do we have to schedule?
They have to come in for that public hearing before you make a vote.
I see. Okay.
And the same as with council, they have to hold the hearing first.
And I mean, would there be more than one public hearing, or could there be more after that?
Well, there would be a minimum of two.
Minimum of two.
And that would be one here in front of this body and one in front of town council.
There could be more, though.
That would be up to the pleasure of you all.
All right. I mean, because I think it needs more, to be honest. I mean, this is a big decision we're making here. It's going to affect everyone. Anyway, that's my opinion.
I think it's concerning that for the open house you have, and I know you're saying that 16 is a decent turnout from what has turned out previously, I guess, but you would think more people would want to be present for that.
Well,
Hopefully.
you would think so, but in many cases, individuals are don't see this as something that affects their lives every day.
But I mean, you've sent all the stuff out, so I don't know how much more you could have done, to try and get people to come in. But I think
every meeting we have is a public meeting, so rarely does anybody ever come to these meetings.
Right.
I've been on planning commission now for over 30 years. And do you know what the biggest turnout was for the planning commission if we had to move our meeting? Walmart. And you had about, let's say, for every 10 in support, there was one opposed. There wasn't any problem, but everybody got a chance to speak. But it just depends on what the public is interested in. And unfortunately, a lot of what we do is not of interest to the average citizen. It may be to a realtor or a builder or somebody like that, but they've certainly had an opportunity, as Kathy said, over 2 years to say something. And personally, I think we've gone overboard to try to make sure that we've got it right. Everybody won't be happy, but that's just the way the system is.
Well, you can't please everyone, and you have to start somewhere. So that's what this is all about. I mean, you can keep refining and refining and refining, but at some point, you have to say, okay, it's time. We'll put it out there. But nothing's set in stone. I mean, this is going to be.
It's also important to remember that the refinement process will not stop when this is adopted.
Exactly.
Because as issues come up, we will address those that aren't working. And if there are areas where the public has concerns and wants to see a change, those changes can still happen.
But at least the foundation will be out there.
Right.
You can change the color of the bricks and siding, but the foundation will be out there that they can be built on.
But once it's adopted and people start doing stuff that devalues other person's properties, then you can't get that back. That's it. You can then change it afterwards, but people have already, they're probably made be devalued. I don't know. I'm just,
That is a true statement, and it's similar to the statement of activities today under our current ordinance that are by right uses that are devaluing properties. So, we have the balance between the problems that our current ordinance is creating versus the potential problems that, that we know this ordinance won't be perfect.
Right.
But I think we are addressing more issues in a positive way than we might be creating problems. It's important to remember, the reason we're doing this is because of the many citizen complaints that we've had that we can't address with our current zoning ordinance because the uses that they're complaining about are by right uses. And to go in and change those piecemeal in the current ordinance would be very difficult, whereas we've tried to build many of those fixes into this one. That's why we've spent so much time talking in this forum.
Okay, John, would you like to review the modifications to the third draft of the UDO?
Right. And some of this will relate to what we've just talked about. All right. So I've added a paper, one sheet to your packet, which will be the second slide here. But as of last Friday, when this was prepared, the changes that had been made at that point, we'd done some basic grammar checking and formatting. There was a correction made to when a minor site plan is allowed. There was a little bit of a discrepancy in the way the wording read. We added a requirement that if private streets are proposed as part of a new subdivision or similar development, that, specifically as a subdivision, that a subdivision variation would be required. In other words, that we would be looking for council to approve that type of a change. Change some on the section in the UDO regarding cluster housing. We had not included cottage style neighborhoods, which essentially would count as a cluster style neighborhood. And we added a requirement that during construction that it be the responsibility of the developer to mark rights of way, and basically to avoid a situation where the town is identifying property rights for a property owner when that really should be within the bailiwick of a professional surveyor. And so those are changes that, you'll notice that these changes are a lot less than after our focus group meetings. The comments that came from the citizen survey were, there were a lot fewer items that were raising objections. So I think we're honing in and getting closer. Since then, we've worked on a few other revisions based on a comment that actually came from the focus group that I didn't get into the during the last revision, there were questions about how our setbacks were set. And so I went through a process of comparing the current ordinance to the proposed ordinance and how those setbacks would be established for each of our existing residential zoning districts. So R1, R2, R3, and then the R1M, which is we're renaming RH for residential historic, and as well as other zoning districts where residential uses are allowed. And when I went through that process, I realized that I wasn't as consistent as I thought. And so I tried to adjust those setbacks a little bit to come closer to what our current ordinance allows, while still giving a little bit of leeway to correct for the way we used to measure them. In other words, making them standardized from a right-of-way line as opposed to the edge of pavement, but also, to try and make it a little easier to position a house on a parcel. The other thing that I've done since then, our town attorney finished his review of the ordinance, and he had a list of 30 comments, give or take, which I thought was gratifying that there wasn't a huge list of things that he had found. And those comments have been addressed in this the current draft 3 of the UDO. Looking at, so those are the changes that have been made to the document. Now I wanted to go through the survey responses and relate them to some of the hot topic issues that we might want to consider and help you understand how these work. So on the topic of accessory dwellings, you'll first want to understand why these percentage numbers don't add up to 100%, because respondents were asked to list up to 3 of the choices. And so these numbers reflect what percentage of respondents clicked on that particular item. And, these won't add up to 100% on this section. So of the respondents, 65% agreed that ADUs, accessory dwellings, would be good for young families and for aging parents. 47% agreed that they would help relieve our housing needs. But I put in the question a caveat that they need to fit into the neighborhood. And 32% agreed that ADUs would help families maybe have some extra income, if they were to rent out an extra dwelling on their site. 30% felt that ADUs should only be allowed as part of the main house. And so if you think of that as maybe a basement apartment, attic apartment, or something like a granny flat in your house, as opposed to a cottage in the backyard. And 27% felt that ADUs would make neighborhoods feel too crowded. And so that was the only kind of negative, but it's less than a third of respondents that had that opinion. Now, that is not uniform support. And so of this, this particular issue could potentially be controversial. Roanoke is currently adopting an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. And when they made their adoption, it was challenged in court because there were people who were opposed to that. And so I don't think these numbers in the survey necessarily mean we should eliminate accessory dwelling units, but I think it's something that would be good for you all to, to weigh, how you think this should be addressed. I don't know if you have any feelings on that, but I'd entertain any.
I mean, I'm always still concerned with the ADUs for sure. I mean, I know you said that Roanoke's have you challenged with it right now. I mean, why not go with the ADU should be only allowed as part of the primary residence to start off with? If you don't think that's, like I said, I'm just worried about it devaluing the properties, the neighbors around there. If we have a bunch of these, I know we've talked about it over and over again, but it still concerns me that back to someone's house.
In other communities where they've allowed these, I haven't seen any evidence that happens.
No. Okay.
But it is something that some people get nervous about.
Sure. And that's what I'm nervous about. But like I said, I just wondered what you've seen in other communities that for these ADUs to be successful, put it that way.
I don't anticipate a lot of them happening.
Right.
In communities where the housing crisis is most critical, places like Seattle and Portland, in California, where state mandated ADUs for all residential lots. They didn't mandate that you put one in; they just mandated that cities allow them.
Right.
In those areas where where average home prices are north of $1 million each, you see more of these being developed because of the housing shortage is so critical.
Sure.
In communities like Salt Lake, where they've allowed them, frankly, there have been few.
Right.
And so,
and again, this is a small town.
This is a small town.
I still like the small town feel to it, but at the same time, we've got to move forward because we're outdated. I understand that part, but
the interesting thing about Wytheville is our older neighborhoods here around, particularly the historic neighborhood and areas along North Street, which are neighborhoods that we kind of point to with pride. They actually have a number of existing ADUs that predated the current ordinance.
Right.
And, for the most part, it's part of the neat character of the neighborhood.
Okay.
And so, we could look at those and, I don't know that we have to make a decision tonight, but, that is probably of what's remaining in our ordinance, the most controversial point. And I just want to be honest and make full disclosure of that.
Can we, if the Planning Commission agrees, and if you want to spend a little bit of time on it this evening, and if you have the proposed UDO available, one thing we could do tonight is to go into that section and see what the conditions are, but also to look at the land use table and to sort of do a recap on where you are proposing that you allow them. Because just to add to what John is saying, like at some point you're going to have to make a decision on this, right? So I would rather that this body feels comfortable about where you've landed. And if you're not comfortable, now would be a great time for staff to know. We can back it up. We can make it a couple of zone districts if we need to. There's a range of options, right? To like not allowing them at all, to a couple of zone districts, to more zone districts. So, or we can change some of the conditions to add bigger buffers if we need to. I guess it just depends on how much time this body wants to spend on that this evening or at the next meeting. So,
because there's a couple of hot topics in here. It's not just the ADUs; it's the the other hot topics
Yeah,
as well.
this is the hottest of the hot topics.
Is this the hottest of the hot topics?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I thought homestays were pretty hot, but
Well,
homestays not too.
the thing about the homestays, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
In fact, we can move on to that. I think it's, well, the next one was mixed use residential. 60%. This again is a choose three of the comments question. 60% felt that mixed use neighborhoods would be convenient, exciting places to live. They so have a positive impression of them. 48% felt that these neighborhoods would make Wytheville more attractive for young families. 38% felt that mixed use neighborhoods should be available, even if they wouldn't choose to live in it themselves. And so, those are the three most common responses. Only 17% felt that they would have a negative impact on nearby homes, and 10% said they didn't like the idea at all.
Right.
And so, there's, on the whole, stronger support for this than the ADUs.
Because I did read in one of the comments there about, I don't remember which it was, but the talk about the crime that increases with these. I'm not sure it was with the mixed use residential, but or the high density residential. They talk about the crime.
Yeah. And, I don't think there's anything to support that.
Okay.
But people live in homes. You got more people, you're probably going to have more crime, but per capita, it may be less. And so I don't see in the statistics of where crime happens a lot of correlation with density making per capita crime increase.
Right.
All right. The next one is homestays. And on this one, 48% felt that they would provide an opportunity for extra income, which is a positive. 32% that they felt that they would take away needed housing, which is a negative. 27% felt that homestays should only be allowed in areas where businesses are allowed, which actually is what we are currently have in our proposal. 20% felt that they're too disruptive for neighborhoods. So that's also in line with where we're at currently, which only allows them in areas where there'd be businesses allowed. 18% felt that homestays should not be allowed in storefronts. And so that's something we are allowing now because we don't have a way to distinguish, what type of building a business goes in.
Right.
And only 3% had any problem with the competition that they pose for the hotels in the community. And so when I look at this, I see a fair amount of people who oppose them because of the noise and the disruption of the neighborhood, and a fair amount of people who oppose them because they take away needed housing in when we have a housing shortage. And so I'm very comfortable, and others that don't like them in the neighborhoods. So I'm kind of comfortable with where we're at now, only allowing them in areas where businesses are allowed. I don't really see an advantage of making them available in other areas through a special exception process. That would be the other option if we wanted to pull back and provide opportunities for them anywhere else. There were a couple of people who pulled me aside at the open house and specifically said, please don't make them available through special exceptions because I don't want them in my neighborhood. And so these are folks that lived over in the historic residential area.
Mhm.
All right. High density residential. This wasn't quite as strong a support as the mixed use, but 55% felt that if we have them, they should be located away from existing neighborhoods. And I think with the R4 zone that we're proposing, we would have the ability, as we control rezoning, to see that that happens. 52% felt that if we have them, that there should be landscape buffers, and in other words, that buffer yards would be provided. And our current proposal for the would require buffer yards between high density residential and lower density residential neighborhoods. 30% felt that these should be only located in business districts, which that would be our mixed use, which would allow a similar use. So there is that possibility. And there were a small group that felt that we should mix these into the neighborhoods. And I was surprised that anyone picked that. But on the buffer yard requirements, the proposed ordinance strengthens the requirement for buffer yards. It expands it to more different variations between land uses, and also requires them, if a new business or industrial use comes into an area and there's a residence or residential area in the same zone district, they would now be required to do a buffer yard, where now, if they're in the same zoning district, they do not have to. And 72% of respondents approved of that change. And only 7% did not approve, with the balance falling in the, I think that's an easy answer. On traffic studies, it was even clearer. The discussion of traffic at the previous discussion this evening. Right now, we don't have any way by our ordinance to ask those questions. And 87% felt that it was either very important or extremely important that we had that.
Should I not be asking that question then?
Well, ask away.
Okay.
But we don't have anything in our ordinance that allows us to enforce it.
I mean, just to sort of clarify that, if you read the current subdivision ordinance, and this is one of the things we're trying to get away from, in our current subdivision ordinance, we use a lot of subjective words, like subdivisions will be reviewed for transportation or traffic or stormwater, but it does not point to specific standards or measurable points. And so that's why our new 350-page document is specifically going to say, if your ADT is 200, that's their traffic count of a proposed development, you will be required to submit a traffic study. And so that just kind of gives you an example of how we're trying to solve some of the problems by giving specific measurable standards that quantify thresholds for when certain things need to be reviewed. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Parking standards. The proposed ordinance would eliminate our minimum parking requirements and replace them with a maximum parking requirement and a requirement that they support their parking proposal with a parking study for commercial development. For residential development, it stays pretty much in line with our current requirements. 76% of the respondents felt that was an appropriate way to regulate parking by requiring the developer to provide a study. And only 9% felt that it would not be appropriate. Conditional use standards. 65% felt that the use standards are an effective way to regulate land uses. 35% felt it was somewhat effective. So they're not as strong, but none indicated that this approach would be ineffective. So we have good support from the community on that, on using all those guidelines in Article 8 as a way to regulate land use. As far as clarity of the ordinance, 46% felt that it was clear and understandable, 44% that it was somewhat understandable, only 10% felt that it was difficult to understand. I think that's a big improvement from what we would have gotten from our current ordinance. So I was pleased with that. On the land use table, 63% felt that it was very easy to use, and only 20% felt that it was hard to use. And there again, I think that's way better than what you would see from our current ordinance. Also on the land use table, here I'm looking at a few specific comments. There were a few that at least one respondent felt that that homestays and bed and breakfasts should not be allowed in the RH zoning district. One respondent was opposed to the payday loan use being allowed at all. Fortunately, changes in the laws have really diminished the prevalence of that type of business, but that was a comment specific about the land use table that we received. Two respondents felt that the 45 bedrooms per acre maximum for R3 zoning was too much. Now, bear in mind that that was based on measurement of actual existing complexes in our R3 zone. So this kind of codifies a top, maximum that reflects our existing ordinance. There were several that expressed frustration with the way the survey was handled, and I suspect that most of them clicked into it in a way where they weren't able to easily open the UDO document. So it made it difficult for them to go back and forth and find ways to review it. So that was a comment about just the presentation of the survey. So based on the comments, I don't see anything from our current document, the way it's set up based on our revisions tonight, that we need to change. The one we might want to consider is the ADU use. That's the only one that I didn't feel like the bulk of the comments were in favor. The homestay, which was equally controversial, I think we've already hit on the right solution, which is to just not allow it in any strictly residential district.
So that was the biggest concern, was the ADUs then?
Right, and it still had more support than opposition.
Right.
Well, we can find out what the public thinks in the public hearing as far as ADUs.
Well, that's true.
You don't think we need more time on it? Or we just gonna?
The, the main thing we need is, to get a little more input from the public, because striking that from the document or modifying the conditions is a fairly easy process to do, once we get to the public hearing. And, we definitely want to respond to the public. That's not the question, but it might be, based on the current data from this survey, we have more in support than in opposition.
Right.
And it was a recommendation from the housing study that we allow that as a way to address our housing shortage. And so there is ample evidence and reason to go ahead and keep it in. But by the same token, I would not want to lose the real important fixes that this ordinance as a whole provides over the sake of opposition to one issue like that.
Just for clarification, if we go ahead and schedule the public hearing, we're not bound to vote on it that night.
You are not.
Yeah. So if we potentially got a lot of negative feedback, we could still make revisions and come back a month later.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it'd be good to have that public hearing to hear what they have to say.
I'm willing to wait to
Yeah,
hear what the input is. from
absolutely.
them.
Staff's perspective, prefer to have on the on your next agenda as public hearing or public hearing and then another item. Staff will do whichever you. To me, it sounds like you just want to do the public hearing and not consider it.
Right.
That might be perceived, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Public hearing and the second night. The public hearing and the consideration in the same meeting, so that's completely up to you, but I just, so that staff has some items.
I would just like to have the public hearing just to see what turnout we get and what responses we get. And then after that, we can then do the, sorry, what?
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Right.
You can think about that. You don't have to tell us now, but if some people see the public hearing and then.
Oh, I see.
Or just the sensitivity. Anything.
Yeah, but the public has a chance to stay after the public hearing to hear what we talk about. I mean, there's nothing that says they have to leave. Most of the public hearings we've had on whatever, we've made any changes and then moved on. And if we do that every time, we'll never get finished.
I think we should have the option to consider. We don't have to. We should have the option. I mean, obviously, if we have a huge turnout and it's very negative, we would not consider it. But if there are not very many negative, if any comments, then I think we should have the option to discuss and consider moving on. Because otherwise, I hate to use this term, but we're pretty much kicking the can down the road. And we can only do that for so long before somebody says, hey, what are you guys doing there one Thursday a month?
I agree.
So obviously, if we can role play this out, right? You could have a public hearing, nobody shows up. Actually, supplies that everybody's feeling pretty good about it.
Right.
The next item was to recommend item to town council. That's one option. Option two would be, again, you have the public hearing, packed full of people, listen to public comments for 2 hours. You get to your next agenda item that says, consider making the recommendation to the town council, then that's when one of you would speak up and say, you know, you do not want to make them recommend this to the council. We need to study these public comments some more. And then obviously staff will take the public comments. You all can discuss and tell staff what you think might
But that way we'd still have the option to go either
be the
direction.
direction.
And one thing to consider, that this is a fail-safe option, because if we approve it, it goes to the town council and they kick it around as well, same as we have, and also have a public hearing. So it's not like it ended with us. We just approved the initial. Yeah.
So option 2 it is.
What I'm hearing from everybody on the next agenda, potentially decide tonight to schedule a public hearing. Your agenda for October would have a public hearing, agenda A. B, item B, a recommendation from council to approve it to that agenda.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There's my, I was going to say, clear as mud, right?
Okay, then, do we have a motion to consider scheduling a public hearing for October the 10th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting at 6 to consider the proposed UDO ordinance?
So move.
Second.
Everybody in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Any further discussion for the planning committee? There being no further business to come before the planning commission, I declare that the meeting is adjourned.